So in this video I'll show you how to take apart and reinstall the headset of a bike. So basically that involves taking out the handlebars first, and then you can take the fork actually all the way off the bike, and then I'll show you how to clean it up and put it all back together again. So there's pretty much two reasons of why you'd want to take this all apart. The first reason is if there's something in the bearings, like you get sand or something in the grease in there, and then when you turn the wheel you can hear it like grinding every time. You don't want that to be happening. So that's one reason you want to take it apart. The other reason you'd want to take it apart, obviously, is if you wanted to take your forks all the way off and replace them with different forks. And that's actually the reason that I'm doing this here today. So the reason that I'm doing this task today is because I want to swap this fork on this bike with this fork here. And the reason is because this is a quite inexpensive mountain bike that you just buy from a department store. And the kind of forks that they put on these bikes, they make them look like it's like a regular mountain bike, a proper mountain bike, like an expensive bike, by making these big rubber things on here to make it look like it has a lot of suspension travel. When in reality, like when this was brand new, I'm sure it didn't move any further than like 1 inch or something like that. And the way they make like this inexpensive type of fork is totally different than the way they'd make the type of fork you'd find on like a proper cross country or downhill or any kind of proper mountain bike that's actually meant for going on trails. Those forks use a technology where they have compressed air in here, and you're floating on top of that compressed air when you're riding over bumps. From what I understand, this design on these forks and a lot of other inexpensive forks is they just have pieces of rubber inside here. So it's just like a kind of an elastic band that they use for your suspension, and that doesn't last for very long too, because rubber over time deteriorates, and this bike here doesn't work properly at all anymore. In fact, I've ridden this through 3 Canadian winters now, and I think it gets water inside them and stuff, and it freezes up, and in winter it doesn't move at all. But even right now, even when it's been sitting in the house for a few days, it really doesn't move, hardly at all anymore. And I think the water just gets in there, and then it freezes, and it breaks all the seals and everything, and then in there it's not, the way it's supposed to be. It doesn't work anymore. So I just want to get rid of these. So you're probably saying, well, why would you want to replace forks that don't move with these forks which aren't even supposed to move? I don't really care that they don't move. What I care about is that in here, this whole joint here is really loose. So what I find is when I'm slamming on the brakes on the front, this whole thing will pivot and it'll sort of rock back and forth. From here it'll pivot back and forth, and you get like a shaky sort of feeling when you're trying to stop, and I really don't like that. It's really not safe, and I figure someday that this is not gonna, it's gonna fall apart when I'm trying to stop from an emergency situation or something. So I just want to get rid of these forks here and replace them with these, and it should be pretty much like riding the same bike, except I'm not going to get that shaky feeling anymore when I'm trying to stop. So the first step you want to do here is remove the handlebars and the stem away from the rest of the bike. And there's two different technologies that are used for forks and stems and the headset and all this stuff up here. And the kind that's on this bike is the less expensive kind, the lower, you see it on lower end bikes. And so I'm only going to show you how to do this kind here. But the way to tell them apart is, see how this one, there's a bolt at the top here? The other kind, which is called a non-threaded fork, I believe it's called. This is called a threaded fork. The other kind is called a non-threaded fork. The way you can tell it apart from the headset is that there's no bolts around the outside of here on a threaded one like this, whereas on a non-threaded headset stem combination, you'd see a bolt up here as well as maybe 2 bolts that somehow fix around here and this plane along here. So I'll show you how to do this kind. If you have the other kind, unfortunately I'm not going to be able to show you how to do that in this video. So the first thing you want to do here is remove this bolt here at the top. This one has like an Allen socket at the top. Other ones have a like a wrench socket you can put a socket wrench on top of, but basically they're the same. So you just want to loosen this off. So this one's pretty tight, I think. There it comes. So just loosen it off a little bit. You don't need to go too far. Maybe do, let's say, 4 turns of that bolt, just like that. And so it's sticking out a little bit. And then to free the handlebars from the fork and the wheel, you stand with the wheel between both legs and both hands on the handlebars and try and turn. And this one doesn't want to turn, and that's because it's kind of seized in there, which is actually really common. So the way that you unseize it is you take a hammer and you hammer on this, the top of this bolt here. Make sure you don't loosen this off too far, or there's not enough threads and it will strip the threads. But as I said before, just do maybe 4 turns of this so it's sticking out a little bit, and then hit it with a hammer. And as you see, the bolt moved right down. And as soon as I get this out, I'll explain to you what hitting it with the hammer does. But let's try that again, but with turning with my hands. It moves very easily now. So now, after it can move, you should be able to just wobble it back and forth and pull it all the way out to reveal what it's like inside. So this is what it looks like inside. You've got the bolt, which is up here, which is connected to this piece up here. And the way it works is you stick it into the hole, this hole right here. You stick both of these into the hole, and as you tighten this thing up, it gets bigger. So like that, that's really exaggerated. But when it gets bigger like that, then it wedges itself against the outsides of the hole, and that's what makes it grip, so that when you turn, the wheel turns too. So the reason it gets seized is because it's been jammed in there with all this force, and then when you try and turn it, it doesn't want to turn because it's wedged up inside. So by taking a hammer on the end of here, then what you do is you push this thing back out, so now it's a perfect circle again, and it's easy for it to pull and turn out of the hole. So since I'm swapping these forks here out for these ones here, I'm no longer going to need my brakes on these forks. I'm going to be putting them onto here. So my next step here is to remove these, but if you're just taking this apart, you don't need to remove your brakes, so you can skip this step. So now next you want to remove this top nut here, and I'm just going to use a big adjustable wrench to do that, and I'm bracing it with my legs standing on either side of the wheel. So I'm just going to do that again with this. So I'll just put that on here, and this is just a regular right thread, so it should just come right off, just like that. And that's what that looks like. And underneath that you just got a spacer, which should just come off like that. And underneath that there's another cone, which you can just loosen off with your hands, no wrench required. And again, it's all right threaded, easy, easy, easy to take off. And that's what that cone looks like. So inside of there you've got one set of ball bearings is up there, and there's going to be another set which is down there on that little lip that's down there. So right now there's nothing other than gravity that's holding this fork on here. So all I got to do is just lift the frame up and let the fork fall down. So there it is, off from the rest of the bike. And that's the other set of ball bearings right there that I was talking about. So we're going to save both sets because we're going to use those again when we put the new fork on. So if you're doing what I'm doing here, which is swapping forks, it's really important to make sure that the forks that you're putting in are going to be compatible with the frame you're using. So they actually vary quite a bit. You need to find some that have the same length of tube on top of where the fork comes out, because the length in the frame, this section here, you can't change. So you need to find a fork that's going to fit your frame. And it can't be way too long either, because the threads on here, they only go so far down. So if you got this thing sticking up way too far, you're never going to be able to tighten it tight enough that your fork's not going to be flopping all over the place. So I actually chose these ones already ahead of time because I knew that they'd have almost exactly the same threads and distance. So that should be fine. So before I reassemble this, I'm going to put the wheel on this fork. So before you reassemble, you want to make sure that all of the rolling surfaces for the bearings are nice and clean. You want to put new grease in them. So that includes the cup that's up here, the cup that's down here, the cone that's on this section here, as well as the cone that's built into your fork. So this part right here, you want to make sure they're all clean and that they don't have any significant pitting in them from wear over time. So everything's all cleaned and inspected now, and I've got the bearings themselves looking all nice and clean as well. Now I just got to put new grease into both of the cups of the frame. And I use white lithium grease, and that's about as much grease as you need. There's not a whole lot of movement that happens here. You know, it's only whenever you turn your handlebars, and you don't really turn them that far most of the time. So it looks pretty good. Now it's just time to reassemble. So this part here just goes back in the hole the way it was before. Make sure you don't forget to put a bearing on here. And whenever you have a cup or cone that looks like that, you always want to make sure that this side, the side that doesn't have the ball showing as much, that side goes against the cone, which is down here for this case. So it should look like that. So you just lift up the frame, drop your fork down onto there. Make sure that you get your handlebars and the cables connecting your handlebars in the right spot. And almost got it. There we go. So now you want to put the bearing in, and you want to put the bearing again so that the ball ends are touching the cone, or touching the cup, not the cone. So you want to make them so they're facing down, just like that when you put it on. And then the cone goes on top like that. And it's a right thread, you just thread it onto there. There's nothing you do other than just your hands. There's no wrench that you need to do that. And really in this job there really aren't very many special tools that you need. Actually, there's really nothing that's special to bikes, just wrenches really. So you want to get that nice and tight, just your fingers tight. You're not going to be able to over tighten it because you're not going to be able to get that good a grip on it. And the next part you put on is that spacer, and notice how there's a little notch there. You want to line that notch up with a little slot that's right here. So just drop that on. And the next piece that goes on is that nut that you put on there before. That just screws right on. And again, you want to use the adjustable wrench and tighten that with your legs gripping the wheel. And just a right-handed thread, just tighten her up, just like that. So next thing you want to do here is get the stem and put it back into the frame, and then you're getting the handlebars back on the bike. And when you're doing this, make sure that you try and keep the cables here, that they're all nice and straight. You don't want them to be all tangled all over the place. There isn't really like a standard way of making cables go, but you just want to make sure that they're not wrapped around or anything, so that when you turn it's not going to get caught or anything like that, and there's lots of slack. So yeah, you just want to put this end here, line the two ends up, and then just put it through the big hole over here, just like that, and just rock it back and forth until it goes in, and then it goes down, just like that. And this is where you can adjust how high your handlebars go up. Use it as like a dotted line or something, like a minimum insertion line or something showing you how high. But I'm just going to put it back to where it was, which is right about like that. And then to fasten in place, you just use your Allen key and tighten it up. So while you're tightening this thing, what it is you're doing is you're offsetting the two pieces of metal, and you're wedging it on the inside of this tube here, and that's what fixes the handlebars to the forks here. And it's really important that you get that nice and tight, because the last thing you want is to turn your handlebars when you're riding and have your wheel, not follow what you're doing, because you're out of control if that's happening. So yeah, really make sure that you get this nice and tight, and after you've tightened it, make sure you verify it by standing with the wheel between your legs and trying to turn it and see if you can make it turn. I've got it nice and tight now, so I feel safe about it as it is. So now that I've got the headset and the handlebars all back on the bike, the job's pretty much done. I actually went ahead and already put my brakes back on, but as I said before, that's not really part of the typical job you're doing here of just taking this apart and putting it back on. But anyways, yeah, so I've accomplished my goal of putting this blue fork in place of that old black one. And I've got this part, it's all cleaned up inside, and there's no sand, new grease. All the surfaces are cleaned. There's no pitting or anything. So the job's pretty much done. The only thing you still got to verify is make sure that you've gotten this headset to the right tightness. You don't want this to be so tight that when you try and turn your handlebar, like it's a real challenge, and there's so much pressure on these bearings up here. You want to make sure that it's loose enough so you can just turn it nice and lightly, but at the same time you don't want it to be really loose Otherwise, this whole section here is just flopping all over the place when you go over bumps and stuff, and it's going to wear a whole lot faster, and it might fall apart or something. So to check and make sure you got that good, you can put your finger on the front brake and try and rock it back and forth, with the bike. And as you can see right here, it's hardly moving at all. The only thing that's really moving is the rubber is flexing underneath the weight. But all this stuff in here, you put your hand here, you should be, if it was loose, you'd feel it moving inside there and touching your hand. So I've got this the way it's supposed to be. So that's pretty much the end of my video tutorial showing you how to take apart and clean out and reassemble a headset on this type of bike. I hope you found it helpful. It's fairly straightforward. Like there's no special tools or anything that's needed to do this job. You just need wrenches and Allen key, hammer. Really nothing too high tech. And it's a job that most people can do. It's really simple. Like it just works. The bearing system in here just works the same as almost every other bearing system on a bike. All you've got is a cup and a cone and a bearing in there, and then you just got to get the tightness right, and that's really all there is to it. But anyway, it's something that you don't do on a regular basis. Like I haven't done this job in probably a year. It's not something that you really need to do, but if you find that there's a problem with your headset, you got to know how to fix it. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching.